Hello, guys, and welcome to the show. My opinion, I think academia, these people that go, they're constantly in school until they're about 40 years old, and then they become academics. I think that it's a huge problem in our society because it's part of the problem that creates a two-tier society where you have the rich and the poor and what's considered to be smarter than everybody else because they have what's called a sheepskin. It's basically a rolled up sheet of paper that says that they're smarter than you because they went to school for 40 years. Uh, it's the world's ridiculous, for crying out loud. But we got these academics out there, and they think they know everything. They think that they are the bee's knees. Anyway, we got a story here to look at. Let's get the charts open right here, and let's take a look at our story. This story is written by an academic, and he says, without really researching into Bitcoin, he's just picked up a couple points, maybe points that other academics have told him. And he's come along and wrote this article that says Bitcoin will still bite the dust. Okay? His name is Kevin Dowd. He's a professor of finance and economics at the business school at Durham University and the co-author of the 2015 paper, Bitcoin will bite the dust. See, he's a co-author. How much do you want to bet the other author isn't an academic too? Anyway, let's get right at it, and let's pick this to pieces. And he's listed here the reasons why, in yellow here, why he thinks that Bitcoin's going to bite the dust. He says, my reasoning is based on two simple, so the basis for his reasoning is two things, two simple economic arguments. The first is that the Bitcoin mining industry is a natural monopoly. Okay, so he says a natural monopoly. And as a natural monopoly, he says it undermines Bitcoin's core value proposition. So let's look up and find out what a natural monopoly is. A natural monopoly is a type of monopoly that exists due to the high fixed or startup costs of conducting a business in a specific industry. So, in a way, he's right. Right now, the way things are, Bitcoin mining, if you want to get into Bitcoin mining, because the difficulty is so high, you've got to buy ASIC miners that are very energy efficient. Okay? And they're very expensive. And because it's expensive, then you've got to get your you've got to get your investment back. So there's a certain amount of time it takes mining Bitcoin before you get your investment back. And when Bitcoin prices are low, you can't make that return of investment, that ROI. So, at this point in time, it is cost prohibitive because the mining difficulty has still remained high, even though the prices fell. And so this does put it in the situation of what he's talking about as being a natural monopoly. But still, we don't see Bitcoin dying. In fact, the price is holding in around $3,500. But let's carry this argument a little bit further. Let's go back to what he said here. He said that Bitcoin, in the top of his article, will bite the dust. I'm sure that he would agree that if Bitcoin's going to bite the dust, it means the price is going to go down to zero. And he actually says that here, that Bitcoin, the price of Bitcoin, will be zero. That's what he says. The price of Bitcoin will be zero. Well, I'm sure he would agree that on the way to zero, it would have to go lower than $100. I'm sure he would agree on that for it to go down to zero. Okay? So here's the thing. When Bitcoin price starts to drop down below, if it were, this is just theoretical, but if the price were to drop down below $1,000, the difficulty would plummet. These companies that got these very expensive ASIC miners, they would just go in and turn the switches off. And the mining difficulty then would drop like a stone. Drop like a stone. Okay? When the mining difficulty gets down low enough, then these simple mining machines that are inexpensive. Also, even your personal computer. You've got most people, if they got a desktop in their house, they've got an old graphics card on their desktop, or even the CPU on your desktop. At that point, you could, when the mining difficulty drops down low enough, anybody could come in and start mining Bitcoin, right? And so what would happen is the hobby miners then would take up the slack until the Bitcoin price started to rise again. Okay? If the price dropped down too low, really low, say $20 a Bitcoin, well, of course, it would even get easier, the difficulty. And you could mine it with your own personal computer or even a laptop. You could mine it. You could probably mine a whole Bitcoin in a week with a laptop if the price were to drop low enough. The network is never going to go down because there's always going to be some guy on there in his basement. You know the kind of guy. The guy that still plays World of Warcraft, you know. You know the guy. He sits there and he's got his Magic the Gathering cards, and he's got his his big thick glasses like this with the big thick lenses on them, you know, and he's always down in his basement drinking a beer and doing stuff. Well, he'll have his machine going, guaranteed, and he'll be solving the Bitcoin network. And you only need a few of those guys, a handful of those guys, to make the Bitcoin network still run, you know. So it's never going to go down to zero. You might as well forget that argument. And what's his second argument here? Okay, so that was his first argument. He says the second is that markets with zero regulatory entry barriers and inferior products cannot survive long term. Okay, so let's take a look at this second argument a little bit. And let's take a look at regulatory. Now, the SEC has already started to regulate Bitcoins, the Security Exchange of the United States. And the CFTC, they've already regulated it somewhat too. But they haven't regulated ETFs yet. They're looking to update the laws, and they've regulated it to a certain degree too. Let's take a look here at the CFTC chair and what he says about Bitcoin. And this is the guy right here. He's the chair of the CFTC, and he's explaining why the United States has regulated Bitcoin futures, but hasn't regulated the ETFs just yet. And he tries to explain it here, but you know it's in the works to regulate the ETFs too. And what we're looking at here, what does he say down here? After he goes through his whole argument, this guy right here, the chair of the CFTC, what does he say down here after he goes through the entire argument? It says the CFTC chairman believes that crypto is here to stay. That's what he believes. So here we have the chair of the CFTC saying that crypto is here to stay, but this guy over here, you know, this guy right here that wrote this article, I think this is a picture, Kevin Dowd. Let me just take a look real quick and see. Here he is right here. Let's focus the thing in so we see what he looks like. Kevin Dowd. He believes different than the chair of the CFTC. He believes that cryptocurrency is going to go to zero. Well, you know, I would like it to go to zero because when it gets down to 1 penny, I'll buy them all. Then the price will go up. Anyway, I think that these guys are dreaming. I'll tell you the truth. Now, let's just take a look at one more thing here before we go. The EU Parliament has voted for closer regulations of cryptocurrencies. And so we see all around the earth, the European Parliament, also the United States, they're all starting to regulate it. This is what's coming for cryptocurrency. It's going to be regulated. So let's go back to his arguments here again. Kevin Dowd. Go to back to page. Excuse me here just for a second, guys. His two arguments. There, basically, both of his arguments have been busted. The natural monopoly argument has been busted, and so has the zero regulatory entry barriers. So his conclusion are based on two arguments that don't hold water. He should talk to somebody before he goes out there and makes all these statements and puts an article out there all about this. He should talk to somebody who's mined Bitcoin for years. You know? Because I bet you dimes to donuts that this guy's never mined a Bitcoin in his life. And I bet you he doesn't really understand how it works. And I bet you he's been listening to an awful lot more of these academics who are saying it's going to zero. Now, I'll tell you what I've been saying about Bitcoin. I'm thinking its low price is going to be around $2,700, $2,800. I was saying that last week. We've dropped another $100 off. We're like, what are we right now? 3,400 or something like that. We're on our way down to break down below 3,000. It's going to set a low. It's going to set a bottom. After it sets that bottom, that's going to drift along a ways. It's probably going to touch that bottom and test it a few times before it tries to go back up. These are discouraging times for crypto holders right now. Very discouraging, you know, because we've seen it price fall from $20,000 all the way down to where it is right now. And we're just going to have to kind of wade through these times while these guys out there like this guy are constantly throwing the odds that Bitcoin's going to go around to zero, you know, which is probably one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard. It's right up there with saying that silver's going to go to zero. And you hear those guys, too. They're constantly out there screaming, oh, don't buy silver. It's going to go down below $10. It's going to go down to $2, a dollar, and all this kind of stuff. You know what I mean? It's the same deal. These guys, most of them don't even know what they're really talking about, you know. And they don't do any research into anything. They just, I guess they want a bit of limelight or something, you know. They want to get their face on the, they want to make themselves a little bit more famous or something, you know. Anyway, listen, thank you guys for listening. Like and subscribe. We'll catch you in the next show. Bye-bye, guys.